I said to Pepe, this is the first in-person conference I've done for 2.5 years. So if I start looking at the screen and forget you're there, it's just because I've done so many on Zoom. When I spoke to Pepe and Alex, one thing I wanted to bring today was some new content that we're developing. And one of the things we've been working on very much over the last year is the idea of flow. And you're going to see flow very prominent as we develop the framework in the future. If you think about SAFe, at its heart, SAFe is a flow-based framework. The object of SAFe is to deliver value to our customers continuously in the shortest sustainable time. Today, we're going to talk about the 8 flow fundamentals. These are 8 tools that you can use to improve the flow of value within your SAFe enterprise. We're going to start by looking at the roots of SAFe. We're going to talk about lean and agile and why that's important. We'll look at where the framework embodies flow. And then I'll go through each of the 8 flow fundamentals in turn, talking about how you can apply that in your context. And then we'll finish the talk by looking at flow metrics. How can you measure flow, understand where the problems are, and then apply these flow fundamentals to improve the delivery of value? So Pepe did a wonderful job introducing me, but I'll say just a couple more things. So my name is Andrew Sales. I work at Scaled Agile. I'm here with some of my colleagues, Lotfi and Michaela, and I work in the framework team there as the product manager. So continually thinking about how we evolve the framework, working with partners and customers like yourselves to understand where we need to make changes, make adaptations to better support the work you're doing. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. When we think about the foundation of SAFe, it all starts with a lean agile mindset. And the lean agile mindset is really critical to make sure that all SAFe enterprises have the right culture, the right approach to be successful with SAFe. There's 2 parts to the lean agile mindset. On the right-hand side, we have agile development. Starting in the 90s, agile development was really a response to more traditional methods of software development. We were moving to iterative development methods, and then in 2001, with the Agile Manifesto, these approaches were codified in a way that made them mainstream. Organizations worldwide started to adopt agile ways of working. On the other side, we have lean thinking. Lean thinking has its roots in lean manufacturing. The idea of moving away from the start-stop projects to this idea of continuous flow. And of course, we've seen that adapted to lean product development, where we start focusing on long-lived products, we start talking about things like value streams, and we understand how we can deliver value to our customers in a continuous manner. Both of these bodies have decades of evidence behind them that demonstrate their benefits and how well they work. We're going to stay with lean today, and we're going to have a look at these 5 lean principles. One of the things that we're working on in the framework at the moment is how we can describe lean clearly. And we're starting to move away from the house of lean, which you will have seen in the framework, to these 5 lean principles. I'm going to talk about them very quickly, and then we're going to focus on the third one, make value flow without interruptions, as the topic of today's talk. So if we think about lean, the first principle, precisely specify value by product, is simply asking every enterprise to understand what are the products and services that you develop that deliver value to your customer. Once you've done that, we identify the value stream. What are the activities, the people, the information needed to be able to deliver and increment these products successfully? Once we have that, we need to make value flow without interruptions. That's what we'll talk about today. We need to understand the customer's need so they can pull value from us. And then, of course, any good approach to lean has the pursuit of perfection. How can we improve our ways of working? How can we adapt our processes to make sure they're as optimal as perfect? Let's talk about flow, though. And what I've put up here is the SAFe big picture, and I've tried to call out all the ways and areas within SAFe where we talk about flow. So at the foundation, we have the lean agile mindset. We just saw that. And lean embodies the idea of flow. Then at the top, and let me see, Pepe, if I can get this working. Oh, it's a bit difficult. There we go. It starts with the operational value streams. What are the steps that our enterprise goes through to deliver value to our customers? How do we deliver that value? Well, either we're selling them a solution, or we're using systems, operational systems, to do the work. Where do those systems come from? The development value streams. All the people who are organized around the work needed to do those development activities. The value streams are either realized through an agile release train or a solution train if we're very large. But even within every iteration, the teams are focusing on flow through the continuous delivery pipeline activities. So we see that we have flow embodied in many levels and areas of the framework. And of course, when we think about the work that we're doing day to day, the agile teams, the agile release trains, all those people working within the development value stream, we know that they're cross-functional. We have all the people we need to do the work, whatever that work is, based on the solution that we're developing. So the question arises, if the framework has flow built in, if the teams and the arts are cross-functional, why do we struggle so much to sometimes deliver value seamlessly to our customers? And the answer to that question is to make sure that value flows, we have to do much more than simply organize ourselves. We have to attend ourselves to these flow fundamentals. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's taken a lot of work to get to this, a lot of research, talking to a lot of partners and customers. But what you see on the slide here is what we really believe is going to make a significant change to the work you're doing and to SAFe in the future. This is what we believe are the fundamental practices needed to achieve flow. And we believe that once you've organized around value and you're operating in a SAFe model, it's these 8 things that you need to be attentive to continuously in an ongoing manner to be successful. I want to step through each one, talk about why it's important, and talk about how we address the problems associated with it, and then we'll talk about how we measure it, and ultimately we'll get to the point where we have a closed-loop system, measure, identify a problem, and then remediate with the flow fundamentals. So let me go through these one in turn. Some of these will look very familiar, some I hope will be new. One thing I'll just say before I start is when you see the new guidance coming out around the flow fundamentals, you'll see that we've made it very practical in nature. We've tried to make it easy to understand and very clear in terms of the steps you need to take. So the first one is visualize and limit WIP. Well, why does this matter? Well, we know that if we have a high level of work in process, our productivity is going to be impacted. The priorities of what we work on will be confused. There'll be a huge amount of work in the system, and the individuals and teams will be switching from one thing to another. And so it becomes very difficult to deliver value. This one is very familiar to you. So what do? Well, the first step is we make all the work visible. We use Kanban systems like the one on the slide to understand all the work in flight. And normally the first response when we do that is for people to gasp in horror. We just didn't realize we had that much work that we were doing. Once we do that, we can set WIP limits. We can constrain the capacity of the system to match our ability to deliver the work, making sure we never take in more work than we have the capacity to work on. So that's a simple flow fundamental one. Once we've got an idea of the work in the system, the next step is to address the bottlenecks. Now, when you look at bottlenecks, they can appear in many different ways, and we've put some on the slide here. Often it's related to skills. Maybe Michaela is the only person on our team who has the skills to work on a particular part of the system. So every time we have work of that type, sorry, Michaela is the bottleneck. We're over-specialized. Maybe we're reliant on a shared service team. Maybe we're always delayed waiting for that customer feedback. Or maybe the system itself is very difficult to work on. It actually becomes hard to deliver that value. The system itself becomes a bottleneck. So what do? Well, the first thing we need to do is increase capacity at that bottleneck. Any work we do that's not addressing the bottleneck will be wasted. How do we develop skills to remove the specialization? How do we build quality into our solutions to make them easier to operate? Or can we bypass the bottleneck? Do we have the ability to replan and resequence the work in such a way that the bottlenecks are spread out and they're not occurring all at once? That's Flow Fundamental 2. Now the third one, critically important, understanding handoffs and dependencies. We know that working within a large system, a team of teams like an art, there'll always be handoffs. When I work on something, then pass it over to Alex for him to do the work. Or there could be dependencies where I'm working from one individual to finish their work before I can start it. We might not be able to avoid these, but we have to understand them. We have to visualize them. If we come out of PI planning and our program board looks like this, we may very well pat ourselves on the back because we completed a 2-day planning event, but we may have very little chance of delivering the plan. Once we've visualized it, the first step, can we better organize around value? Can we apply things like team topologies to create team structures that try and minimize these handoffs and dependencies? Can we reorganize our arts to make sure that each team or each art has the skills they need so there aren't handoffs from one team to another? Can we at least make them visible so we understand the problem we're trying to solve? And can we take some corrective action in terms of the way we describe our work, the way we define the system, the way we split the work amongst all the teams? So these first three are critical. We've visualized the WIP, we've looked at our bottlenecks, and now we're trying to minimize the handoffs and dependencies. The system is starting to work better now. But the next step, and a very critical step, is asking ourselves how quickly we can get feedback. Our ability to get feedback determines our ability to make sure that we're aligned to the plan we need to deliver. And in SAFe, feedback is always of two types. We have technical feedback. Are we building the solution right? And we have customer feedback. Are we building the right solution? And if we're delayed in either types of this feedback, flow will be impeded. The technical system won't be validated, problems will emerge, there'll be a lot of rework, or we'll simply be building the wrong thing for the customer, requiring us to change our plan. So we're asking people within a SAFe enterprise, do you have both types of feedback covered, technical and customer? Can you shift the review process to the left and start getting that feedback sooner? Don't always wait for the work to be completed. Show work in process. Get feedback along the way. And then finally, of course, we know the importance in SAFe of objective measures. Are we able to integrate our working systems continuously to make sure we're validating them from a technical perspective and putting them in front of our customers to get their feedback as well? So the system is starting to work better now, and we're getting good feedback. But one of the real enablers of flow and of fast feedback is small batches. We talk about this a lot in Principle 6 already today. Large batches of work will delay that feedback. Large batches of work propagate problems throughout them. And we know also that large batches of work lead to huge variability in the time it takes to complete them. We need to control batch size to be successful with flow. We're going to use things like iterations and PIs to control the size of the work. Stories fitting within iterations, features fitting within PIs. We're going to look at our processes. Do I have to wait so long to hand off the work to the other team? Can I process a smaller batch? And what kind of batches do we have? We have release batches. We have integration batches. We have customer feedback batches. So we're going to look for batches all over the system. And of course, we're going to use things like automation as much as possible to allow ourselves to process smaller pieces of work. So we're starting to get there. And one thing I want you to appreciate as I'm going through these flow fundamentals is these things are not a once and done. We need to apply ourselves to addressing these things continuously. And one of the ones we need to think about is also managing queues. When we talk about queues in SAFe, a queue is any amount of committed work. So we need to work very hard to make sure we never commit beyond the current PI. We make a commitment to our PI objectives, but beyond that, we're just forecasting. If we have too much commitment and the queues are too long, we lose our ability to be agile and be responsive to changes coming from our customers or business stakeholders. We're going to make sure that all the work the teams do goes through the backlog as well. Sometimes we find that teams are committing to queues of work where there's informal work happening, it hasn't gone through the backlogs, the team haven't formally taken it through their intake process. So we've got to be mindful of not committing too far out into the future. And then the penultimate one, and this one's really critical. One of the things that we're seeing again and again within safe enterprises is two individuals who do the same job are exhibiting very different levels of productivity. Why? Because their time in the zone is affected by their ways of working. What do we mean by time in zone? Think about the work that we do, complex, adaptive solution development. It requires us to be in the zone where we can focus on the complex work that we're doing. It can take 20 to 25 minutes to get in that zone. If we're interrupted, we get pulled out of the zone. If we have unproductive meetings, we get pulled out of the zone. If the system is very difficult to work on and it takes a long time to understand what to do, again, we get taken out of this productivity zone. So one of the key flow fundamentals is to ask yourselves the question, how can we keep our people in this productivity zone as long as possible? What does it look like to question every meeting that we're in? Is it productive? Is it delivering expected outcomes? Is there something we can do to improve it? Do we need it at all? So we need to start questioning again and again, are our interactions and collaborations during the day best suited to keep us in the zone? We can use some productive collaboration methods. Alex is going to run us through an open space today. Things like mob programming, pair work, they're perfect for driving collaboration and high productivity. So it's not about working on your own, but it's about assessing and creating a highly productive work environment. And then finally, remediating legacy policies and practices. One of the things we see again and again when we go into safe enterprises is that the old ways of working that brought you here today are being maintained alongside the new agile ways of working. Some of them are mutually exclusive, some of them are contradictory, some of the old ways of working will actually inhibit you getting the benefits out of the new ways of working. So we're making a plea here. We're asking all leaders and change agents and SPCs like yourselves, as you go back to your safe enterprises, look for some of these legacy practices. Are you keeping in place some of the manual reporting methods? Are you still tracking timesheets alongside moving to an ALM tool? Are you doing heavyweight documentation or requirements gathering alongside managing features and stories through the backlog? So we've got to be very disciplined at making sure we address some of these legacy approaches. We have to do it with some sensitivity. These old approaches brought us here today. They were hugely successful in helping the organization succeed. All we're saying is that these are not perhaps the best ways to move forward, so we have to address them. So let's just take a pause for a minute. We looked at the 8 flow fundamentals, and I can't stress enough how much flow is going to guide the work we're going to do at Scaled Agile in the future. It took us a long time to get down to these 8 core things. These are things that we think you can apply at every level of the framework. You can apply the flow fundamentals within a team. You can apply them across an agile release train, a solution train, or even a portfolio. And some of the guidance we're going to put out in a couple of months will be just that. Guidance articles to apply these at each level of the framework. But we can't apply them until we understand where to apply them. And that's where we need to think about how do we measure flow. Now, last year, we released a significant update to metrics within SAFe. The previous approach of metrics within SAFe was more of a, here's a bunch of things you can measure. The new approach was to give you a dedicated measurement model. The measurement model had 3 domains. Outcomes. Are we delivering outcomes to our customers and business stakeholders? Competency. Are we getting more proficient in our agile ways of working? And flow. This is the flow domain. It has 6 flow metrics. Each of these flow metrics has a particular relationship with the flow fundamentals. What I'd like to do is show you each flow metric, make a recommendation as to whether you measure that at the team or art level. That's the focus for today. And then make the connection back to the flow fundamental. If we're seeing poor flow distribution, what are the fundamentals we need to apply to be successful? And then we start to create this closed-loop system to help you improve your safe ways of working within your enterprise. So let's have a look at these. The first one is flow distribution, and we really recommend that you measure this at least at a team level. Flow distribution is asking the question, what are the different types of work that this team is working on? These are just suggested categories, and typically you measure this at the end of each PI. Flow distribution is critical because it makes sure the team understands whether they're applying too much effort to business features and stories, potentially letting the system degrade in terms of technical health, or too much to the technical side of the system, perhaps not delivering enough value to the customer. How do we address this? And this is really what I want to show you today and what I'm excited about. Let's have a look at that. Flow distribution. The problem it surfaces is what I just described, either a degrading system in terms of health or reduced value to the customer. Well, which of the 8 flow fundamentals can we use to remediate that? Well, let's get feedback. Either technical feedback, is the system optimal? Customer feedback, are we delivering the right kind of value, enough of it, and soon enough? And then let's manage queue lengths. If we can manage our queue lengths, it lets the team adjust their distribution from PI to PI as they need to adjust the type of work they do. So you start to see now this strong connection between what we recommend you measure and the flow fundamentals needed to remediate any problems that you might be seeing. Let's have a look at the remaining flow metrics. Team velocity, you've seen this before. It's very familiar, either measured in story points or number of stories. Again, we recommend this as a great measure for all agile teams. For 2 reasons, really. Flow velocity is simply measuring the productivity of the team. So all things being equal, we're going to see the productivity go up to a point. Eventually, the second thing we want to see is a nice stable productivity. Is the velocity predictable from iteration to iteration? Does it allow the team to clearly plan and understand their capacity? Some of the problems we see with this are underlying productivity problems. The team is simply not productive enough. There's a problem they need help with. Or we have this unpredictability. We're going to work in small batches. Flow Fundamental 5 is perfect for this. If the team can reduce the batch size of their work, not only will they be more predictable, it'll be easier for them to understand and isolate problems with productivity in the future. And then secondly, optimizing time in zone. I talked a lot about this. We all know what this feels like. Maybe we're not in the office so much these days, but as we start to go back to the office or we're online, we get in the zone, we're about to work, and then Michaela messages me. And I'm out the zone. I've got to deal with it. Then I've got to get back in the zone. So we've got to look at those 2 flow fundamentals alongside flow velocity. Let's move up now. Let's move up to the art level. What do we recommend you measure at the art level? Flow time. Flow time is when I start the stopwatch, once we start working on something, till I deliver that value. Measuring flow time with features is absolutely perfect. And we recommend you use a histogram, like on the slide here. It gives us a nice indication of where most features are in terms of flow time, but it also lets us identify these outliers. Which features are taking more than a PI to deliver? Does it matter? Maybe not. Maybe it does. Maybe these were the 3 features we needed to really deliver this PI because the customer relied on them more than anything else. Any of these flow metrics can be applied at any level of the framework. You can measure flow time at the portfolio level. You could measure flow time at the story level. All I've put up here are some suggestions of where I think they give the biggest and most value. We can do a lot of things to address flow time. First of all, we're going to visualize and limit WIP. We're going to use program Kanban systems to make sure we don't have too many features going through at one time. We're going to minimize handoffs and dependencies. When you come out of that PI planning event, stand back and have a look at your program board. Have you created a plan that is truly deliverable? How much red string do you have? How many red stickies do you have? We have to think about how we can optimize the system to make it easier to deliver and execute that plan. Small batches, of course, again, but also number 8, remediate legacy policies and practices. At the feature level, this is where we start to see the old ways of working coming in. As we deliver those features, as we release them, as we define them. So look at the work you're doing and ask yourself, are there any practices that we no longer need? Or worse than that, are there any practices that are inhibiting the way we're trying to work in terms of lean and agile? The other thing we need to measure at the art level is flow load. How much work do we have in the system at one time? And here we typically use something like a cumulative flow diagram, looking across all the states in the Kanban, counting the number of items we have at any one time. On this CFD, I actually took the done state off. If you have the done state on a CFD, over time, the done state is going to eat everything else, and you won't see any detail. So we took the done state off, so now this is simply a measure of the work in process over time. This is critical. High work in process or increasing flow load is a leading indicator that queues are building up and that you're going to have longer lead times in the future. So if you start to see the gradient go up, we need to address it as soon as possible. We're going to visualize and limit WIP, of course, flow fundamental 1. And that's flow fundamental 1 for a reason. And then flow fundamental 6, we've got to manage queue lengths. We've got to get better at asking ourselves, what level of commitment do we need to make today, and which commitments can we delay to the future? Flow efficiency. This one, perhaps more than any of the flow metrics, is important. This one is giving you a view of the health of your system and the processes that you're using. We recommend you measure this at the art level. What we found is if you measure this at the team level, it gets very detailed, the work is too small, we don't really surface those delays. This Agile release train has taken a feature, and it's watched the flow of the feature through all their activities. It's applied value stream mapping, and it's got a good understanding of how much time is spent working at each stage versus the amount of delays waiting for the work to be processed. The flow efficiency then is simply the total flow time that it takes for this feature divided by the total active processing time. So how much time are we actually spending working on this thing, adding value, versus how much time is it taking to get through the system? And what we see a lot of the time is this single-digit flow efficiency. Most of the time spent in flow time is delay times. Work is sitting in a queue, waiting to be worked on. And this does two things. It reminds us that if we spend a lot of time thinking about how we work faster, that's not going to address any of these problems. The problems exist within the delays between the steps. And the second thing it reminds us how important it is to illustrate the cost of delay to our leaders and stakeholders. If we can express these delays, not as a time, but as a cost, how costly was it that we delivered 2 months late? I promise you that'll get their attention, and then we can start addressing some of these inefficiencies. We can look at the bottlenecks, continuously measuring and addressing the bottlenecks in the system. How can we remove them? How can we add more capacity to support them? We can look at the handoffs and dependencies again. And then finally, stressing number 8, which of the legacy practices are not supporting the ways we want to work in the future? Okay, the final one to close the system, flow predictability. When we speak to leaders and executives, the one thing they tell us that is important more than anything else is predictability. They want the ability to be able to make promises to their customers, to their shareholders, to their board members, and be confident that we can deliver on those promises. You know that within SAFe, we measure predictability through the program predictability measure. what percentage of business value did we deliver at the end of the PI based on the commitment we made at the beginning of the PI. We're not looking for 100%. 80 to 100%, that guard band works well. It gives us enough predictability to be successful, but also allows the teams to be ambitious in the work that they're doing. If we're not predictable, either above or below, we don't have the ability to be confident in the work we're doing and the value we're delivering to our customers. We need to address this, and fast feedback is going to be the best way to do this. Throughout the PI, as early as possible, validating the work we're doing on a technical perspective, but also with our customers. Are we building the right things, and are we building it right? Making sure that if we need to make any adjustments later in the PI, we have that information as early as possible. And then finally, of course, working in small batches. We know from Principle 6 that small batches are the biggest enabler of predictable systems. Large batches have huge amounts of variability built into them. They really prevent us being predictable in the work we need to do. So let me summarize a few things, because we covered a lot today. We're trying to move the conversation within SAFe to focus even more on flow. We understand that it's challenging to implement and organize our teams and arts around value. Enterprises are making great steps in doing that, but people keep telling us that they're still struggling to deliver this value continuously. What we're trying to do with these flow fundamentals is give you a toolkit, a set of remedial practices that you can apply at each level continuously to improve the benefits you're getting from SAFe. And alongside those flow metrics that I showed you, you now have this system. Take the flow metrics, measure where you are today, use the mapping that I suggested, it's not the only one, as you highlight and surface problems, apply the flow fundamentals, and then measure again. And this is a continual process. We measure, we improve, we measure again. Please don't think that you can only apply the flow metrics in the way I suggested. Those are just my ones that work well out of experience at the team and art level. And please don't think these are the only ways that you can apply the flow fundamentals, but this is a mapping that I found useful to make that connection. In terms of the guidance, I can't promise a date, I can't make a strong commitment, but I believe in a couple of months, you'll see a whole set of these flow fundamentals articles come out. One that will describe the bigger picture, why are these important, what does each of them do, and then a separate article describing how to apply it at the team, the art, the large solution, and the portfolio level. So look out for that. The metrics and the flow metrics are already live in the metrics article. And of course, please reach out to me if you have any questions. And I think we're going to take some questions now, so I'll move to that. Thank you very much. My legs are sore.
Yes, what?
My legs are tired, standing up, you know?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some questions here.
Yeah.
You can read them, or they're all in English, so go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So the first question, well, thank you for the question. So the first question was what practices we could apply to find the optimal batch size. So this is an activity we talk a little bit about in the SAFe classes, finding the optimal batch size. The optimal batch size being this nice sweet spot between the transaction cost not being too high and the holding cost not being too high. One of the things we always say in the SAFe class is finding the optimal batch size is what we call a U-curve optimization. And that's really good. It means that we have a nice wide area within which this optimal batch size will exist. To actually find it in practice, one of the things I think we want to do first of all is visualize the flow of work. If we start to see that the flow of work is creating bottlenecks within each step, perhaps that means that the batch size is too big, we can't process it quick enough to alleviate those bottlenecks. The other thing, of course, is if we start to see predictability being affected, it's another good indication that potentially we can look at the batch size of our features to make them smaller, make them easier to deliver in a shorter period of time. But the honest answer is that it's trial and error. Batches will occur in lots of different ways, and different batch sizes need to be applied depending on what the batch we're talking about. So a customer feedback batch Do we want to speak to the customer every day? Probably not. We probably don't have enough new work to show them. Maybe once a month is enough. If we find that we're not building the right thing and we're deviating from their needs, we make it every 2 weeks. An integration batch, do we want to wait 2 weeks to integrate? Probably not. We want to integrate every single day. If we don't, the build will break, the health of the system will degrade. So maybe integrating daily is the right batch size in that circumstance. So we need to play around with the different batch sizes depending on the type of batch it is and the information we're trying to get. So it really is a trial and error approach. Could you answer the second one, maybe, Alex?
I think the presentation at itself will not be shared. I say in Spanish, I can't do in Spanish. La presentación no la compartiremos como tal, pero vamos a hacer un montaje en vídeo con las diapositivas, con Andy hablando. Recibiréis un email diciendo de dónde verlo, ¿vale? Entonces, no tal cual, no como PPT, pero vais a tener...
I don't mind making it as a PDF if people, and then Pepe can distribute it. So yeah, if people find it useful, I can turn it to a PDF and then you have the guide. It's no problem, yeah.
Okay.
What techniques can we use to bring people into the zone? This one really resonates when we talk to people about this because we really feel it. One of the things we need to be very mindful of is when people need the time in the zone versus when they need collaboration. One of the things that some of the teams have started doing at Scaled Agile is making it clear on the calendar, when is this zone time? And I can see that Lotfi has, on a Friday, 2 hours in the morning when he's going to be in the zone. And although I have a burning question for him about where he wants to go for lunch, I'm going to wait to ask him until that zone time is finished. So we want to be respectful and make it visible as to when we're trying to get this in the zone time. The second thing we want to do is be really hard on ourselves. Have someone like Alex, a great facilitator, helping us in the meetings, understand, is this meeting valuable? Are we really getting value out of this meeting? We've always done it. We've done it for years. But what is the real value that we're delivering? And we're asking you to question all the meetings you're in, all the interactions you're having. Is it bringing value? It's okay to come out of the zone if there's value to deliver. We have to come out of the zone from time to time. But if there's no value to be added and it's brought us out of the zone, then it's a highly unproductive event. When we looked at the research around this, it can take 25 minutes to get back into the zone. And if there's any developers here, you will resonate with this. Where were you in the code? Who's worked on something since you've gone? What has changed in the system? So we've got to be very mindful. There are some great collaboration techniques, though, in the Agile world. When we work within the framework team, we do a lot of pair work. It's wonderful. We learn from each other. We find things that the other person didn't. We can progress the problems very quickly. So collaboration techniques can help you to be productive. Just be mindful of which ones are productive and which ones aren't. OK, the next one, any suggestions on how to visualize the non-visual impediments that working in IT software implies? Not the same working in Jira than assembly line. Yeah, so this is really interesting. One of the things when we talk about the bottlenecks in the Flow Fundamental 2 is that we found that it's not always possible to surface bottlenecks through visualizing the system. One type of bottleneck in particular around skills specialization, either over-specialized or not access to specialization, is very difficult to surface through visualization. So there we need to use things like retrospective techniques, things like inspect and adapt, problem solving, getting the team to surface the qualitative feedback and problems that they're having, not relying just on the visualization of the system. So Flow Fundamental 2, we recommend using the system to visualize the bottlenecks, but also using retrospective techniques to make sure we surface them through those means as well. Keep going, Pepe? OK for a few more minutes? Want me to keep going? OK. Is someone going to make me pronounce this name at the bottom here? So someone more familiar than me can answer this. Does it sound like the same concept? Yeah? OK, OK. Would you? Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
The same idea. When people enjoy a lot what they are doing, that in that moment, all the creativity that they have is totally focused on doing that action. It's the flow. When you
Perfect.
are in the flow
Yeah.
concept, the flow zone.
And you mentioned something there that I didn't mention that was really nice. It's not just about productivity. It's also about happiness and satisfaction at work as well. So it's one thing just to look at the numbers, and maybe I say two things here. In the flow metrics article, you'll see a couple of things mentioned. One is that we need to use the flow metrics in combination. So maybe we see something like the flow time improving, but actually when we look in detail, we see that our predictability is all over the place. We're delivering features really, really fast, but we're not able to deliver the business value associated with our objectives. Well, that's not good. And the second thing we always say with the flow metrics is don't just look at the number. We're not just chasing flow velocity. We want to speak to the teams. We want to understand their satisfaction, their happiness. We want to understand the problems they're facing. So we always make sure that we do the Gemba and we go and understand the numbers that we're seeing. Maybe I could just say two things quickly in conclusion. One other thing I'll say in the flow metrics article that is useful is that we're not suggesting you measure all those flow metrics at each level of the framework. We need you to measure flow in some way at each level, and I gave you some examples. But one thing we say in the article is ask yourself two questions. When you think about adding a new measure, ask yourself, what question will that measure answer today that I can't answer without it? And the second question to ask is, do I need to answer that question right now? We want to make sure that people aren't measuring too much. It becomes a huge burden if we do that. And the final thing I'll mention, if Alex and Pepe don't mind me saying this, is we just published another new article on Friday, actually, on a topic related to metrics, but this time related to outcome metrics. It's a topic we get asked about a lot, which is OKRs. So if you go to the Scaled Agile Framework, to the advanced topic page, or if you look at the blog, there's a blog post I put up there, a brand new Applying OKRs to SAFe article. And there we've identified 3 use cases of where we think it works very well to apply OKRs to SAFe. We don't want to build dual systems, SAFe and OKRs. We want to use OKRs where they add real value. So we talk about creating OKRs at each level to align people to strategy. We talk about using OKRs to create measurable business outcomes for our epics. And we talk about using OKRs to create transformation goals. So I hope you find that article very useful as well. And obviously ask me any questions. Don't make them too hard, please. Okay. And I think that's the time, Alex and Pepe. Perfect. Thank you, everyone.